Hello, my students. Good morning from Ottawa. I'm recording this lecture so that you can revisit the lecture again and see it carefully because paradox model is very, very important. Today, I'm going to discuss about the paradox and how paradox helps us understand different ethical situations, help us understand how we develop our reasoning, how we create our arguments, and how um, in different how people make decisions or arguments based on their socioeconomic, cultural, personal, and other dimensions of the society. So today I'm going to talk about these things here. So the paradox model and the moral reasoning, for example, if you see this book here, Cases and Moral Reasoning. So this is the whole book. I often recommend to several students to read this book because whatever the cases the book has used, and they try to analyze using paradox. So whenever you find a unique situation, wherever, you can definitely imply paradox to understand the situation in an ethical, moral way. So let's start. I don't know how it begins here. So in the beginning, I just want to give you some terrorist attacks, some bloodshed, this kind of incidents around the world, and how world media covered this incident in a different way. Then I will apply them with the paradox and moral reasoning. Then you will understand, oh yes, how paradox helps us understand why different countries, different media are using different ethics and values. Let's begin. So in 2019, there was a very, very serious attack by one person in New Zealand. The incident was held in March 15, and it was a terrorist attack by a white supremacist. I'm not naming the guy, 28 years old, and he entered two mosques in New Zealand, Christchurch, and then massacred 51 people and 40 injured, and he live streamed that shooting on Facebook. And right now he's in prison. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. If it was not New Zealand or some countries like USA, maybe he could have been given a death sentence because it's a really serious attack. Now we can see how New Zealand media and Australian media covered the same scenario in a different way. For example, within 3 months after the shooting, around 1,000 news reports were published in New Zealand's major news outlets. Out of that, only 10% or less, they published the name of the perpetrator. Others, they try not to publish the name, just they said perpetrator or some other synonyms, because they don't want to add additional hatred because of the name. Or, for example, there are similar kind of names in other parts in other societies can be the subject of bullying, so that we should be careful about the name as well. And media denied his exposure of face. And even the court also ruled in the same way that if they have to use the physical appearance of this person, then they have to pixelate his face, mean blur the face. And mostly faceless, nameless identity of this person. And the media coverage was more focused on the incident, the massacre, the implication, the consequences, the legal and other social, moral, psychological consequences. So they were more focused on reparation. They were more focused on the actual incident rather than the perpetrator, his name, his identity, and where he is from, what he was thinking, what was his philosophy. They were trying to sideline that. Here in Australia, something different happened. For example, Australian media tried to cover the same incident in a sensational way, big headlines, and photos of the perpetrator, more bloodshed pictures. And even Australian media published the audio excerpt containing the cries for help, so how people cried and reacted. So that is terrifying for the other audience too. But Australian media didn't care about that. And one example, the Herald Sun wrote dramatic descriptions of the victim being shot, how the victim was shot. Okay. And then the coverage of the victim was largely focused on physical horrors, bloodshed, injuries, graves being dug. Oh my God. Attacks, attacker's face, attacker's name, attacker's manifesto, attacker audio, everything was published. Why? Why Australian and New Zealand media are different? Even though both are democratic countries, neighboring countries, and both advocates for human rights, press freedom, why these differences? So these differences we can understand by using the paradox model, number one. Next year in Las Vegas shooting in 2017, it was a country music festival, and there was a terrorist attack by another person, a white supremacist, 68-year-old. I'm not naming again. 91 Harvest Music Festival, and he was residing in 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay Hotel. 60 people were killed, 411 were injured. The largest single person mass shooting in US history. Such a terrible, and some Canadian and some other country nationals also were the victims of that incident. And the motivation of this incident was unknown till now. However, what happened to the American media now? So immediately after the shooting, there was a series of misinformation, fake news about the shooter's identity and motives, because there were some reports they were calling. There are some links of IS or some Muslim extremist. And at the same time, IS also claimed that Paddock was its soldier who had shot as requested by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to punish the coalition countries like the USA. Because it was the time when ISIS were winning some areas in Iraq and Iran, Syria, and that area, and the ISIS was a big problem, big threat during then. And the countries were losing the war, and ISIS were invading some major area in the Middle East. And America was against that. And Baghdadi at the same time tried to capture the essence that, okay, he was our soldiers and we wanted to do this to punish America. And at the same time, Google and Facebook also circulated the misinformation, rumors, and they were criticized later, how Google and Facebook have to promote misinformation, the unauthentic information, because it was under investigation and police was trying to find out the connection between this person, the perpetrator, and any link to extremist group, but it was not found anything. Terrorism framing for Muslim shooters, normal coverage, and non-Muslim involvement. So there are two incidents we can figure out here. Like in New Zealand, a white supremacist, Here, another white supremacist. And in other countries also, when whites are involved, usually they are less likely to be immediately linked to some other extremist group, some international mafia group. But when there are some non-Muslims are there, and they are quickly associated with some mafia group. So this is the trend even in media and even in international media narratives, especially in the West. Downplaying of white male identity in violent crime carried out by a white man may prevent the public's understanding of the potential motive of the shooting. So we don't know yet what was the motive, because the person was died immediately. He was shot and killed. And there were further investigations, but we're not sure what exact the motive, because prior to this incident, the guy had a very good history, no big issues with police. And he was in retirement home, and there was nothing why he was so much angry, and he had so much poisonous thinking in his mind. This is the second incident. Kunmin, China, 2014. A group of 8 people attacked a railway station with knives, and in a railway station passengers with knives, and 31 people were killed, 140 injured, 4 of them. And the government authority, the Chinese police, immediately killed 4 of them and arrested some of them, and maybe some of them were escaped. And no group claimed responsibility why they did it. Chinese government blamed the Muslim extremist separatist group for the attacks, but it was not so much verified information too. And media coverage now here, the China and American media. So China's media system and American media system are different. China has Soviet communist press system, so that the government can control the press, and journalists are the member of the political party. In American media, it's a libertarian and more social responsibility type of press. They are free to criticize, they are free to cover their ideas, but still the socio-political narratives, they influence the media coverage here. Media of the 2 countries employed various framing strategies based on the ideological background and national interest. For example, CNN immediately called it a terrorist attack without any reservation. CCTV, Chinese national TV, supported the government approach of China, usually because CCTV is the part of the government, so definitely it is obvious. And hidden government agents are behind it to promote ideals of the peaceful and unified society. So there are some, the media also try to, even though they find some information, they try to hide those information, and they try to publish those filtered information that helps government motives and propaganda or whatever. Because this is the government controlled media system, so we cannot find independent criticism and accountable press. Here, for example, China imposes censorship on reporting of knife attack. This is published in Guardian on similar date. Media that report on the knife attack incident that occurred March 1 at Kunmin railway station must strictly adhere to Xinhua news agency war copy or information provided by local authorities. Do not treat the story with large headlines. Do not publish grisly photos. Please respond to confirm that you have received this message. Thank you. So the government clearly ruled that other than Xinhua news agency report, no other report will be published, or any report that contradicts with the spirit of Xinhua news will not be published. So local government authority ruled out this way. Means you can understand how media works there. Here in another massive attack in Norway, child massacre in 2011. There is one guy, 32 years old, Norwegian, white again, and whatever you call supremacist or whatever. And he killed children. Most of them, 77 children were killed in Otoya Island. 242 were wounded. They were in a children camp. And he earlier exploded some bombs in front of Prime Minister's office building, killing 12 people. And he was imprisoned for 21 years. This is also a serious, very serious crime like New Zealand or the USA. And if it was the country like USA, then he could have been hanged or some kind of capital punishment. So very serious, very dangerous, killing so many people, especially children. The media coverage of that, again, similar to like New Zealand's media coverage, here you can compare. The Norwegian media, they were quite restrained, control themselves, try to focus on the incident, try to focus on children, victims' family, their well-being, rather than focusing on attacker. In the beginning, there was some kind of humor. Mainstream news media suspected non-ethnic Norwegians behind this attack, especially Muslims, for the attack, subject to the harassment and violence to the community, because there are some kind of racial biases within Norway community between the native Norwegians as well as immigrant Norwegians. So international media also linked that to Muslims extremists due to Norway's involvement in the war of Afghanistan. There is one sample from the Sun newspapers from England. Immediately the second day after the incident happened here, next day, I mean, the Sun clearly labeled that Al-Qaeda massacre, Norway's 9/11. So international link, another Al-Qaeda is behind the attack. So this was the message, this was the voice, this was the narrative that they tried to build. So like in New Zealand's incident, New Zealand media and Australian media try to build a different perspective here also. But Norwegian media also in the beginning suspected some non-native Norwegians or the immigrant Norwegians, maybe they are not pleased and they were behind this attack. And now there are some key ethical, moral questions, especially from the perspective of the media's point of view, ethical point of view. What can media ethics contribute to the coverage of terrible acts like this? Number one, when terrorism is a complicated issue, can our ethical thinking implementation be superficial? Is this enough, or we need something to think more? How should news media cover images of the dead bodies? The usual understanding is we try to control a very graphic bloodshed, full of bloodshed type of pictures, try to control, and in some countries, they also rule that not much focus on the perpetrator because we are focusing on the motive of the perpetrator. And this is already harmful to society. And what steps do journalists to take to make these decisions? And here, each of the cases is different, even though the American incident, the New Zealand incident, the Norwegian incident, they have a similar kind of, some kind of similarity, like white supremacist, I mean, local non-ethnic person, a non-immigrant person is involved. And there is not found any international link of the terrorist attack. We don't know. And in China, we are not sure who they are actually, and behind them, who are they? I mean, maybe they are also similar like the native Chinese. And even though China said it's a terrorist attack, and we're not sure yet whether it has some international link or not. Each case is different. So each case should be evaluated, interpreted, analyzed in a different way. Here, ethics and values now. Ethics is more focused on the right and wrong. What is right, what is wrong. Ethics is more focused on what is the correct action and what is not. Ethics is more focused on what are some universal principles, in generally applicable, understandable, and universally implementable principles or values. And there are some limitations as well. Values are somehow focused on individual or organization or some community, they are not universal usually. What is important? So for example, ethics was focusing more on what is right. Values are more focusing on what is important to you, your group, or your society. What should I achieve, or my society should achieve, my nation should achieve, different from person to person. So ethics are more generalizable, applicable to different situations in different countries. Values are different, community to community, person to person. So here we should understand ethics and values. Ethics is the discipline dealing with what is morally right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. Ethical system derives the critical process of how we work through moral issues. So there are some moral issues, and we try to implement ethical principles and try to interpret that, and we reach to the conclusion. So values are acceptable principles or standards for a community, for a group, for a nation, but they're not universally applicable because different countries have different value systems. And we have to make decisions based on values as well as based on the ethical principle. We try to complement values and ethics each other. Yeah, look at here the values, especially from the point of media ethics. So as a journalist, for example, professional values, what are your professional values? Proximity means nearness. If incident happens nearby your location, then that is more important than similar incident happens somewhere in Australia or in Argentina. That is less important from the point of view of Canadian local journalist. Firstness, breaking news. Impact and magnitude, what is the size of the victim or consequences? Newness, how new is this? Conflict, if there is some kind of conflict. Conflict also is the element of news value. And human interest, entertainment, toughness, thoroughness, immediacy, independence, and public right to know, and watchdog. These are the professional values for a journalist. At the same time, moral values. Moral values are more focused on as a human being, not just a journalist, not just a teacher, not just a politician, like truth-telling for all human beings, humanness, being kind to all human, kind, justice, fairness, believing on that, freedom, independence, responsibility, honesty, non-violence, commitment, self-control. So these are the values applicable for everyone, moral values. Aesthetic values are also applicable to everyone, like harmonious, pleasing, imaginative. So when something is beautiful and we want that, we want to see that, we want to use that, something beautiful. Even when we do a media coverage and we do a good page design in a community newspaper, picture, graphic, words, headlines, all balanced, nice to look at, aesthetic values, logical, consistent, competent, knowledgeable, argumentative. These are the logical values. So for example, somebody claiming something, and what are the evidence to support that claim? These are the logical values. And socio-cultural, so thrift means generosity, a kind of economizing, hard work, energy, restaurant, heater. So these are different types of values. So even a single person may have multiple values because of his profession or her socio-cultural setup. Values in journalism, we know it, these are the four principles of the Society of Professional Journalists, an American professional organizations for journalists: seek truth and report it, minimize harm, act independently and be accountable and transparent. So these are the four principles. And here, Norway attack, for example, look at the value system now. Whose value? So values to consider for journalists, reporters, news media workers. So value is for proximity. How near is it? Immediacy, how quick it is. Public's right to know, truth telling. That's another value. Humanness, handling image of the dead, trying to avoid the perpetrator's philosophy and thinking because that can further deharmonize the society. And for the terrorist, and violence and hatred. And for the police and government, justice, rule of law. These are the values. So different professions, different people have different values because of their position, where they are stationed. So are they police? Are they some other officer? Are they just simple workers? Are they some politicians, for example? So value system depends person to person. Yes. And options for covering the story in the attacks like this: respect victims and families and their right to privacy, number one priority. However, there are some other priorities for journalists, like some journalists, they want to use that story as a part of their professional career so that they want to sign their career further. So use the story to further your career or reputation. Another option. Another option is use the story to gain new audience and top your rivals in the news media. Okay, this is the right time now. What you are prioritizing, making more subscriber and beating the rivals and standing as the number one. And stay loyal to your country and avoid giving credence to brave diatribes. Now you are trying to follow what government says. For example, Chinese local officials, government order all media follow just the Xinhua news. So here you can be loyal to the government, supportive to the government, as if you are and you are not criticizing anything and simply supporting the government. This is one. And seek balance and fairness in reporting. Yes, actually, to be a professional journalist, number one and number 5 priorities are the important priorities, but second, third, fourth also are other priorities, competing priorities. Sometimes journalists, they want to twist the importance of this story into their career building or into the building of the reputation and prestige of the media organization and beating the rivals. So values are different. How we want to proceed with the story. Same stories are there, but what is the motive of your story? Public right to know or competing the rival? So which option is the most ethical? Definitely number 1 and 5 as a journalist from that point of view, but we need a guideline, a moral guideline, like the Potter box that helps us where to go. Here, the Potter box is because Ralph B. Potter, he was the retired professor at Harvard School, and he developed this idea. He was very much interested in the ideas like this, ethical issues, how to solve the ethical issues, how to understand those issues. And his Potter box model has 4 dimensions. Defining the situation. What is the actual situation is this in this category. Defining the situation. What exactly is the situation, for example? I just want to see if anything can help me right here. And then after that, identifying values. What kind of value system you have right now? Are you a journalist? Are you a police? Or who are you? And what are your values? What you want to prioritize? Public right to know, what's dogging, or supporting to the government? And what ethics you want to apply? What ethical principle you want to apply? There are several ethical principles, like the golden mean, win-win situation, compromise is the priority. The categorical imperative by Immanuel Kant, that is, If there is a rule, follow the rule, forget about the consequences. There is another ethical principle, that is utilitarianism. That means consider the consequences. When you are making decisions, think about the consequences. If consequences is bad, change your decisions and improve this. So this is a bit more commercial type of ethics, cost-benefit analysis, majority rules and that. And there is another principle by John Rawls, that is veil of ignorance. I mean, just merit, forget about what the person is, where he or she is from, what is their gender, what is their ethnic origin, where they are from, what they know, how much they read. But if you are judging some competitions, then forget all those. Don't try to know their socioeconomic, socio-demographic background. Simply focus on the content, what they have written. It's a fair competition, equal to everyone, equal treatment. And that is also, these are the four major principles applied and oftentimes discussed, but each principle has some kind of difficulties. So we'll be talking this in another lecture. So paradox model, for example, here, again, fact, empirical definition, mean the real fact. And then identifying values based on a philosophical, reflective, internal, positive, negative values. Sometimes negative values also, like in the incidents, the terrorist attack, what we found, the terrorist or the perpetrators are trying to promote hatred between different communities, immigrants and non-immigrant communities, white versus other communities, and they want to play within that. This is also maybe their value. And appeal to ethical principles, then you apply to some ethical situation, virtue, duty, utility, rights, love, I already said. And then your loyalties mean what you are loyal with. Are you, as a journalist, are you loyal to the public? So public's right to know is the first priority. Are you loyal to the government because you support the government? And then so that you don't care of the, you care as a second priority to the public, but the government. For example, in China, the local Kunmin attack and the Chinese local authorities ruling. So if you're loyal to the government, then think that way. Or social well-being, benefits of the society, nation's interest, media's agenda, social well-being. What kind of loyalty you have, your media has. And so the decision comes that way. Here's one or two examples here. Paradox applied in the case of Norway terror case. So here, the terrorist, a terror rampage, killing 77, wounded 242. We already talked about that. And his police record, he has some complicated history, erratic police response to the terrorism. And values, legal values, obey the law, punish the perpetrator. Social cultural values, compassion for victims, restraint, staying peaceful, control yourself. Social cultural value, because otherwise that can create a kind of difficult situation in a harmonious community. And personal values, Breivik's white supremacy is the personal value. Professional value, public's right to know. As a journalist, we have to. Political value, maybe anti-immigration or pro-immigration. This is political value. And now the principles, again, multiple principles are applied and loyalties are now checked. Duty to our organization, due to subscriber viewers as a journalist, duty to the government as the journalist in a country where media are quite controlled. And then you can reach to some kind of conclusion, judgment, decision. It means media outlets report truth, but avoid sensationalism. They may adjust policy on interviewing those in shock, how to approach the victim's family, for example, strengthen policy on anonymous sources, trials, police confidentiality. So So from definition to values to principle to loyalty to, and then only you reach to the judgment. So this happens in almost all ethical situations. And here is another incident similar like this, just applying paradox model. Liverpool murder case. This case was happened in 1993 in UK, Liverpool. What was the problem here is 2 10-year boys, they killed one 2-year-old child. And then it shocked not just the UK, it shocked the whole the world, because 2 10-year boy, and this is blamed for the television's violence later on, because children, they watched a lot of violent movies and serials and other things and plays, games, whatever. And because of that, they were more inspired, and they tried. And these 2 young boys, they mutilated the 2-year-old child. And this body was found 2.5 miles away from the location where her mother was just taking care of the child. She just was maybe in a nap, and then the child was taken from there. So it's a case. So how little James died, and little James photo here. So the situation is here, the ethical problem is whether we should publish the photos of those juveniles, like 14 years or below, in some countries 16 years or below, number one. Whether we should name the perpetrator because they are just below 10 years. So we should think this way. And here now, again, the paradox moral reasoning, paradox applied here. 2 10-year-olds go to trial for kidnapping and brutally murdering 2-year-old Jason Burglar. And British television honor the court restrictions against reporting juvenile names. US newspaper do not support that, and they just try to go with the public right to know. And principle, British televisions, other regarding care, more careful, restraint, control. American newspapers, they were just following the rule, categorical imperative. I mean, the perpetrators should be named, finish. How old they are, they didn't care about that. So, and loyalties, British televisions, juveniles, defendants and their families, they are more loyal to those victims' family. US newspapers were just care of the readers' general understanding and general readership. They didn't care about the other things. And judgment, British television withhold broadcasting the pictures, the boys of these 2 boys, and US newspapers publish names and details and everything of these 2 boys, those who are the perpetrators. So these are the 2 different value systems. And these value systems are working in a different way in a different situation. Here is one example. I'm not showing you right now. In the YouTube, you can watch this link. There is a small situation. One boy and one girl are in love, but the boy is cheating another girl. And another classmate sees that situation, and she just tries to apply how to reach to a decision by applying the paradox model. And she says she wants to control she wants to disclose the identity of the boy who is the cheater, but want to control the information and don't want to disclose the information of those 2 girls, because they are not, they were the victims, and the boy is only the perpetrator. So even though the girls, boys, all, this is the situation, and in empirical situation, when we respect the public's right to know, then we should name everyone. But we are not naming everyone because we just want to control the information of those victims, and we want to disclose the information of the perpetrator. Even though we advocate every news should be based on facts, and we should disclose all information. So rules are there, but we compromise rules based on different value system. And this is the same thing happening in this video. So determining the ethical decision. Now, this paradox model, on the one hand, this is applicable to everyone, the audience, the journalist, the news media owners, the other people, whosoever. Everybody can decide, number one, how to reach to the decision, what value system they follow, what ethical principle they want to use, and what loyalties they have, number one. On the other hand, the paradox model also helps us understand somebody's decision, somebody's writing, somebody's argument, because we should try to interpret what value system the writer has, what ethical principle the writer has in their mind to apply that, and what loyalties they have. So all the news biases, all the narratives built with it, and or sometimes conspiracy theories are used. So this paradox model help us understand those values, to interpret, to understand better what is already written, what is already argued, as well as this help us to reach some kind of decision based on our value system, whether we prioritize the journalistic standard as a journalist, or we prioritize our own benefits. Like, by using this story, I want to go for the next fellowship or some next target of the profession. So in this way, paradox model help us understand how decisions are made, number one. Number two, how we make our decisions. So this is all I'm telling you today about the paradox. Try to read more about the paradox, see some dramatic situation, and even watch this 6-minute video that I just showed you the link. And then you try to understand, or if you find some difficult, complicated situation, try to use paradox model and what kind of ethical principle you want to apply. So in the next video, we are talking about the ethical principles. Thank you very much for watching this. Thank you.